This happened 2 years ago. The moment I stepped into that house, everything changed. It was the end of November. My head had been packed full all week. I just wanted to disappear for 2 days. So I booked that small Airbnb just outside the city. The house looked simple and clean in the photos. The perfect place for a quiet weekend. I arrived in the late afternoon. The air was cool and a light rain was falling. One of those calm autumn evenings. And the first feeling I got when I stepped inside was nothing unusual. There was a mild, musty smell, typical of old houses, but it wasn't unpleasant. More like the familiar scent of rain softening the wood. I walked around the house, doing the classic "what's in which room" tour. The bedroom was small, a queen-size bed with floral bedding. Next to the door was a narrow pantry-style cupboard, just enough space for cleaning supplies or an extra blanket. I checked the bathroom. The towels were neatly folded. The soap was new. Everything looked in order. Okay, I said to myself. No one can bother me for the next 2 days. As it got darker outside, the house grew quieter. Like most old wooden houses, when the temperature shifts, you hear those faint creaks. I heard them a few times. One from the ceiling, one from the corner of the living room. Normal, I thought. Most of the homes around here were built in the 70s. They make noise even when the wind moves. After midnight, my eyes were starting to close, and the rain outside had gotten heavier. I got up to turn off my laptop and the lamp in the living room. That's when I noticed. The side window in the living room was slightly open. Not enough to move the curtain, but the lock didn't seem fully engaged. It looked like it would open if you ran your finger along it. I paused for a moment. I remembered checking all the windows when I first arrived, and besides, there was no wind outside. Still, I tried to calm myself. I probably missed it. Or maybe the cleaner left it cracked to let some air in. I went over and closed it. When I turned the lock, I felt the metal click into place, and I relaxed a little. Before going to the bedroom, I stopped by the bathroom. As I grabbed my toothbrush, I noticed the cabinet under the sink wasn't fully closed. It was slightly ajar, like someone had shut it in a hurry and left it that way. I paused again, because I had never opened that cabinet. When I first came into the bathroom, I had only checked the shelves to see if there were towels. I had no reason to touch the cabinet. I pushed the door. The hinge was loose, it didn't close properly, and swung back open. Okay, I said. So that's all it is. I got annoyed with myself for getting worked up, but as I was leaving, I noticed the soap dish on the top shelf had shifted slightly to the side. The spare toilet paper I had left on the bottom shelf also looked moved. Small things, and my mind immediately brushed it off as the cleaner must have been rushing. At night, you don't want to dwell on details like that. I went into the bedroom. I closed the door and turned off the light. Sitting on the edge of the bed, plugging in my phone, the only sound was the faint hum of the charger. My eyes drifted to the pantry cupboard. Thin, white IKEA-style doors. Just then, a very faint sound came from inside the cupboard. Not loud, not clear, like a tiny metal piece shifting around. For a second I thought, maybe it's a plumbing sound, but there was nothing like that in the room. The sound came directly from inside that cupboard. I stayed still. I listened. Then a brief flash of light came from the bottom of the cupboard. Very faint, like a phone screen lighting up for a split second. My heart started racing. Maybe it's a car headlight, I told myself. But the window wasn't on that side. The curtains were closed, and there was no road nearby. Just an optical illusion, I said. I tried to cling to any explanation. Then that sound came again. A faint scraping. The exact sound a small device makes when its lens rotates. A short, plastic metal kind of click from inside the cupboard. And suddenly, the normal explanation part of my brain just shut off. The house wasn't creaking. There was no wind. The hinges weren't rattling. This was the sound of something someone had made. And it was inside the room. I didn't move. I just stared at the cupboard. In the dark, the door looked even paler, almost as if someone were standing right behind it. I felt like if I waited one more second, the door would open. I didn't wait. I stood up quietly. My shoes were by the door. I bent down and grabbed them. I unplugged my phone without turning the screen on and slipped it into my pocket. My bag was in the living room, but I didn't go for it. I had only one thought in my mind: get out, now. I opened the door quietly. I didn't look back as I stepped out of the house. I opened my car door, got inside, and locked it. Only then did I turn on my phone. My hands were shaking. I called the police. "Give us your address," the operator said. My voice was strained, but I explained. Someone might be in the house. There was light and sound coming from inside the cupboard, and I had left. "Stay in your car," he told me. "We're sending a team. Don't go back inside." I gripped the steering wheel tightly. All I could think about was that cupboard, that glow, that sound, and something inside me knew, even before I shut the door, that someone had been watching me. When the police lights finally entered the neighborhood, the street came alive. Red and blue reflections hit the windows, and the quiet area looked like it had been shaken awake. I was still sitting in the car, waiting, still clutching the steering wheel. 2 officers approached my car. I rolled down the window. I don't remember everything they asked, just a few short questions. I nodded. Then they said, "Stay in the car," and headed toward the house. When they stepped onto the porch and opened the door, my chest tightened. I watched every movement as their flashlights swept across the rooms. Nothing happened for a long time, only the faint crackle of their radios. Then a voice rose from inside, though I couldn't make out the words. Then a short creak, like something pressing against wood. Their flashlights seemed fixed on one spot. Even then I thought, please let me be imagining this. But a few minutes later, when they finally came out, the look on their faces told me everything. They had found a hidden space behind the wardrobe. The layer of dust had been disturbed, and there were drag marks. Someone had been standing there very recently, maybe just before I arrived, maybe while I was inside. That sentence took the air out of my lungs. It felt like my stomach dropped. Shortly after, the landlord showed up. While the police talked to him, I watched from a distance. The calm on his face melted within minutes. He was clearly panicking. His expression said more than his words. It was obvious he knew something. I heard him mention a short-term guest from last month. Things like, "left early," was a bit strange. I couldn't hear the rest. The house was sealed. The landlord was taken away in a police vehicle. The neighborhood fell silent again. But now that silence felt completely different. A notification popped up on my phone from Airbnb. "Your stay has been terminated early for security reasons." And then the same question kept circling in my mind. Was the person hiding behind the wardrobe there before I arrived? Or did they sneak in after I entered the house? I still don't know which is worse. But when I heard the police talking, one sentence hit me harder than anything else. The space was so narrow that anyone who entered couldn't leave without me hearing it. So from the moment I stepped into that house, maybe I was never alone. So tell me, if it were you, would you have dared to open that closet door? Some business trips stay with you for a long time. Sometimes, even before you get out of the car, you think, this night is going to be strange. Normally, I don't take that feeling too seriously. For years, I've lived with the routine of one-day meetings, hotel rooms, roadside stops, and morning coffee. I know what feels normal and what feels too quiet. After the meeting, I left work. That night, I was staying at an Airbnb in a small town. The host had sent a message. "You can check in anytime. The key is at the door." The moment I turned off the main road, it started raining. At the end of the road, I saw a modern house standing alone. There were no other lights around. No neighboring houses, no street lamps. Just one porch light, flickering in the rain. The first thing I noticed when I walked in was that the house was much more spacious than I expected. In the photos, it looked like a modern tiny house, but in reality, it was quite open. The living room was decorated in light colors and kept simple. A few abstract paintings hung on the walls. In the corner, there was an IKEA-style bookcase with a few artificial plants on top. On the kitchen counter sat a coffee machine with 2 packs of filter coffee beside it. The house looked like it was designed specifically for short-term business travelers. The bedroom was at the end of the hallway, and the work area was right next to it. There was a wooden sliding door between the two. In the work area, there was a small desk, a desk lamp, and a narrow window beside it. I was about to open my laptop and get settled when I heard a brief metallic scraping sound mixed with the roar of the rain. It sounded like someone dragging a long piece of metal across the garage floor. It happened only once. Probably a pipe shifting, I thought. The house looked new, but plumbing makes noises sometimes. It's normal. I changed clothes and took a hot shower. When I came out, I noticed one of the hallway lights flickering strangely. It looked like the bulb was dying. I stepped into the hallway and flipped the switch on and off a few times. The flickering stopped. I relaxed and went back inside. But just as I was about to enter the room, the sliding door was half open. I had closed it. I even remembered the sound it made when it clicked into place. I paused, staring at it with my hair still wet. Maybe I didn't push it all the way, I told myself. I must have been tired. I pulled the door again and closed it. It slid quietly along the track and clicked shut. I opened my laptop and looked over my presentation for the next day. I exchanged a couple of messages with my team on Slack. I thought about making coffee but decided it was too late. When I lay down on the bed, the rain outside had grown heavier. The wind had picked up, and the sound against the roof had deepened. On nights like this, if I were in a hotel, I'd hear the lobby downstairs, footsteps in the hall, the distant hum of a TV. But here, there was nothing except the house itself. I must have fallen asleep. I don't know how much time passed. Suddenly, I woke up to a persistent clicking sound coming from the work area. It was so regular that at first I thought something was tapping in the wind. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. The house was dark. Only a flickering light from the hallway seeped through the door like a thin line. I walked over to the sliding door. I placed my hand at the end of the rail and opened it. The work area was empty. The desk lamp was off. But the pencil holder on the desk was trembling slightly, and the edges of the papers were rustling. Right then, the hallway light flickered again. The faint yellow glow went out for a second, then came back. And just as I was about to close the door again, the tapping suddenly stopped. Instead, slow footsteps came from the hallway. This wasn't the wind. It wasn't the creaking of wood. It was familiar, like someone walking barefoot inside the house, slowly. 2 steps, a pause, then one more. I looked into the hallway through the crack in the door. It was empty. Only the flickering light remained. But the sound was unmistakably clear. It was as if someone was standing in the middle of the hallway holding their breath. I closed the door. That familiar sense of something is wrong settled in my throat. As I shut the study door, I thought I heard someone breathing very close to me. One of those moments where you can't tell if it's your own breath or the house. Stress. Just stress, I told myself. I had to wake up early. The meeting, the presentation, the drive, it was all piling up. In places like this, your mind amplifies everything. I got back into bed. I placed my phone on the nightstand. I checked the time, 1:17 a.m., just as I closed my eyes. A very distinct click came from the door. the exact sound of a lock being tested from the outside, just slightly, like someone feeling for the handle. I heard it. I sat up instantly. There was a second click. My heart started racing. I jumped out of bed and hurried to the door. I turned the handle, pushed the lock from the inside, and secured it. The mechanism clicked into place, but my hand was still shaking. At that moment, that metallic scraping sound came again. This time it was closer, heavier, as if someone inside the house was dragging something across the floor, and that something was passing directly in front of my door. As I stood there, I heard a faint creak from the work area. The sliding door was opening, millimeter by millimeter, by itself. My hand was still on the door handle. My room was dark. The hallway light leaked in through the crack. And as I looked through that narrow opening toward the desk, a voice inside me whispered, "Something was there just now, and it's still here." It felt like time froze in the gap of that sliding door. I didn't dare open it fully. Through the narrow space, I noticed the papers on the desk were now scattered, some fallen to the floor. The desk lamp was off, but one corner of the room was darker than the rest, as if someone was standing there. I saw 2 wet footprints leading into that darkness. I hadn't stepped into the hallway after my shower. Those prints weren't mine. I told myself, maybe it's the landlord or maintenance staff. But the lock, the footsteps, the sliding door, none of it was normal. No one enters an Airbnb in the middle of a storm without warning. I waited. 1 minute. Silence. I grabbed my phone. I looked toward the wardrobe. The door was slightly open. I hadn't touched it. I swallowed hard. I needed to get out. I decided to climb out the window. I jumped out. The rain hit my face, my feet sank into the mud, but I didn't stop. Something crashed inside. A table, a chair, I couldn't tell. But someone was inside. I ran to my car and locked the doors. I called the police. My hands were shaking. The police arrived and checked the house. The living room, kitchen, hallway, all empty. The study was messy but empty. The wardrobe in the bedroom was open, wet footprints still on the floor. "Officer, these aren't yours, right?" Me. No. No one was inside, but there were signs. I couldn't stay another second. I drove to a motel in town. I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about those footprints, that breath, that sound in the wardrobe. And all I can think is this: who was in the house? That one-day business trip turned into the longest night of my life. I will never go back to that house. In fact, if I can help it, I won't even take that road again. I experienced this last winter. It had been a week since I rented that little house on the edge of the forest, just outside the town. I wanted to get away from the city and clear my head. When my friends asked, "What are you going to do all alone at the edge of the forest?" I told them, "A little silence won't hurt for a while." That idea, which sounded perfectly reasonable at the time, started to feel very different once night fell. The house was old, but it worked well enough. A tin roof, a wooden porch, a small shed in the back that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. During the day, everything felt normal. The quiet of the forest, the sound of birds, the distant rumble of trucks on the highway. But when night came, the atmosphere of the house changed. It felt like the place that belonged to me during the day was handed over to something else after dark. That evening, it had been raining for hours. The metallic clatter on the roof, mixed with the faint glow of the camp lantern, gave the house a strange, timeless feeling. While I sipped my coffee, my eyes kept drifting to the no-signal icon on my phone. That's when I heard a faint click from the porch. At first, I ignored it. I'm pretty good at explaining things away. But a few seconds later, the same sound came again, this time clearer. It was like a wet shoe lightly tapping the edge of a wooden step. I raised my head and listened. The roar of the rain drowned almost everything out, but that click didn't belong there. It's just the wind, I told myself. That's always the first reflex in places like this. For a while, there was nothing. I tried to calm down, picked up my cup. But just as I was about to drink, another faint clicking sound came, this time from near the window. There was no way the wind could explain that. I dimmed the lantern a little, and as the room darkened, I could see outside more clearly. That's when I realized something. With the light on, it was hard for me to see outside, but someone outside could easily see me. I crouched down and moved closer to the window. I lifted the corner of the curtain, millimeter by millimeter. At first, all I saw was rain, falling like a gray curtain over the yard, turning the ground to mud. My eyes drifted toward the shed, and that's when I saw him. A man was standing in front of it. He was wearing a dark hood. His face was hidden in shadow, but his movements were clear. He held a black, square bag in one hand and was searching for something in a hurry. He bent toward the shed, looked around, then turned back toward it again and again. Suddenly, the man straightened up and lifted his head. It looked like he was staring directly at my window. I dropped the curtain immediately. My heart was pounding in my throat. I crouched there and didn't move. For a while, there was only the rain, then a metallic noise. Maybe a lock in the shed, maybe the wind, I couldn't tell. And then a much clearer sound. Footsteps, wet, heavy footsteps, the squelch of mud, the faint creak of wooden steps, not coming onto the porch, circling around the house instead, like drawing a slow, deliberate circle. I quietly backed away, checked the front door, slid the chain into place. Then I went to the back door. Even the soft creak of the floorboards made me feel more exposed. I checked the handle. It was locked. As I moved around the house, I would sometimes hear those footsteps, sometimes lose them completely. It felt like whoever was out there was stopping in certain spots just to listen, then moving again. I grabbed my phone. Still no signal. Calling the police was nearly impossible. And even if I could, what would I say? Someone is walking around the house, but I didn't see their face. It didn't sound like much of an emergency. I sat down beside a chair and dimmed the lantern even more. I listened to every sound, the rhythm of the rain, the water dripping off the roof. And somewhere between all of that, those footsteps, sometimes painfully clear, sometimes maybe just my imagination. At one point, I felt them getting closer to the front of the house. I didn't think they were on the porch yet, but they were close. All I had for protection was a thick piece of firewood. And at that moment, it felt like real defense. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Sometimes I swore I heard footsteps, sometimes nothing at all. The rain swallowed most of the noise. But one thing I knew for sure, I wasn't alone out there. Someone was in the darkness. Someone with that black bag. And I had no idea why they were there. By the time I finally drifted off, the fear had become unbearable. When I opened my eyes in the morning, the lantern was still on. I didn't feel rested. I felt like I had survived something. Everything was quiet, but the tension still hung in the air. I went to the window. The yard was empty. The porch was drenched. It looked like nothing had happened at all. Before stepping outside, I stood at the door and listened. Then I went onto the porch. The ground was soaked. The rain had washed away any tracks. I walked to the shed. The door I had seen open the night before was now firmly closed. The swollen wood barely budged. I hadn't imagined it. That door was open. Just as I was heading back inside, I noticed a crumpled card in the corner of the porch. I bent down and picked it up. There was a handwritten note on the back. Hello. I came by today to check some items and the fixtures, but no one answered the door. I especially wanted to check the kitchen cabinets and a few things in the living room. I'll come back tomorrow. Please be ready, or let me know if someone will be there. Paul. For a moment, I felt relieved. Then I looked at the photo on the card. The man in the photo was not the man I saw last night. The one in the photo was heavier, with a clean, round face. The one I saw was thinner, tenser, and definitely hiding. I flipped the card over. There was a single footprint blurred by the rain. A few faint tracks led from the porch into the mud, but there were no tracks coming back. They just stopped. Completely. As if someone had approached the house, dropped the card, stepped on it, and then simply vanished. That day, I locked all the doors and stayed inside. When the rain started again in the late afternoon, I heard that familiar snap on the porch. I held my breath instantly. I'm sure there's a logical explanation for all of this, but I don't think I'm ready to hear it. Because whenever it rains, I remember one thing: that man standing by the shed, his black bag, his silent footsteps, and the fact that I still have no idea what he was looking for. Maybe it really was maintenance. Maybe it was nothing at all.